welcome to colleagues joining us from both in and outside the UK. I'm Jason Harwin. At today's Capita Policing Insight webinar, we're going to explore how harnessing the power of artificial intelligence can transform police information management. Getting the best out of the information we have is so important to policing to help tackle all the ever-increasing challenges and also improve our response as part of the criminal justice system. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by three professionals and subject experts from Capita today. Firstly, Dave Tonks. Dave is the Policing Digital Transformation Consultant at Capita and is the former operational lead for Police Scotland's Digital Enabled Policing Programme. That's a real mouthful. Hello, Dave.
Hi, Jay.
Secondly, we've got Neil Skellum. Neil is the Business Development Director, a part of Capita Intelligence Communications. Hello, Neil.
Hi, Jason. Nice to be here. Thank you.
And you, thank you. And last but not least, Piers Campbell. Piers is the Data and Artificial Intelligence Guild Lead for Capita. Hi, Piers.
Hi, Jason. Nice to be with you this afternoon.
And you. So, colleagues, we're going to do it the three parts of presentation. So, firstly, Dave will discuss the legacy and disparity in information management challenges faced by police forces. He'll talk through some of the operational expectations, how we might exploit new practices and technologies to secure better value for money. During Neil's presentation, he'll talk through a more high-level overview of the technology available to solve policing information management challenges now, particularly handling data which isn't stored in core systems, which enables, importantly, how we can improve service across the public sector. And lastly, Piers will delve into the role of artificial intelligence and how it will work alongside police forces to make policing data work harder, make it more efficient, boost productivity, and improve operational insight. So before we get started, let's just do some housekeeping. So, importantly, today's event follows the recent published Independent Policing Insight report commissioned by Capita called From Back Office to Critical, Business Critical. If you've not read it, it's well worth a read. And again, we'll share the link following today's episode. At the same time, whilst we've got an hour to go today, we do really want to make this a two-way conversation. So there's a great opportunity throughout the presentations to be putting questions into the questions chat box. And again, we'll pick them up after each presentation. And if we don't get to them, we'll do them through the Q&A at the end. Likewise, if we've not finished all the questions by the close of play today, again, we'll answer them and get them to you later on. And lastly, we will be recording the event. So again, it will be available to review at a later time as well. So no more ado, let's get started. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning, everybody. So a little bit of scene setting from me, and then a lead into to Neil and Piers, who'll be able to provide a lot more detail in their respective areas. So 30 years in policing until I transferred across and now working for Capita, as Jason described, as a digital transformation consultant, but still hugely passionate about about policing, but in particular, I spent the last 10 years in policing, leading various aspects of remodelling within Police Scotland, and ultimately digital was at the centre of each and every piece, and it is hugely important, but as yet we haven't really, I think, within UK policing fully got to grips with digital, and we're not yet leveraging it to the maximum extent. So just hoping through today's seminar to maybe add to the debate about why this is the case and how we go about improving the way that we deliver with the support of digital technologies and capabilities. So just got a few slides to help out. I thought it might be sensible to start just by answering the question, well, why is digital, and answering it, why is digital so important? I think we all recognise that it's the single biggest enabler of performance for every organisation, bar none. That's well rehearsed now. It's generally accepted across all sectors. But there's a lot more to it than accepting that it's a major enabler. How we utilise digital technology is really what's important. So why is it important? At the very heart of policing is really people, processes, information, knowledge, decisions and actions. So the inputs are the people, the processes, the information, the knowledge and the skills. And the outputs are decisions and actions. And whilst policing is hugely complicated, because there are many, many different flavours of subject, subtle changes of circumstances can change the necessary actions quite dramatically. at its heart, it consists of millions and millions of these sort of processes by which the people are leveraging existing processes, that they're using the information that's available, they're applying their knowledge and skills, aiming to make decisions, take actions, and hopefully those are as efficient and effective as it can possibly be. Now, why digital is so powerful is because it can impact on every component part of that process. So technology is able to provide people with the right information. It can provide them with assistance in making decisions. We can look at our processes as a business and identify, because they're enshrined in technology, ways of where there are waste and there are opportunities to improve. We can look at bringing more and more information together to provide better background information for the people making the decisions. We can use technology, increasingly AI, in the form of bots, to go away and provide assistance in the form of reference information that might be helpful. Assistants that are specialists in their own right, being available to call up at the click of a button. All of this is about improving the millions and millions of decisions that take place within policing on a day-to-day basis. Jeff, if you could just move on to the next slide, please. So the national decision-making model is central to this cycle of decision-making. So I've taken the national decision-making model here from just the College of Policing website and just appended some thoughts as to where we can apply digital technology and in what ways to each part of the cycle. So we know that in many police organizations, the data is still separate. It's still held in different systems, and it's not necessarily the easiest to bring to bear across records management systems, command and control systems, personnel, duty rostering, etc. So we can use technology to remove the silos and bring all relevant contextual information to bear. And by that, there is also a process. There's also a process of filtering information, because ultimately dropping a lot of information on users is in itself problematic. What we need technology to do is identify that which is valuable. And if it's not valuable, we filter it out. So what we're trying to do is provide people who are ultimately making decisions with information in a usable format where the information provided is valuable to them. So if we then look at the assessment of, well, what's going on, this kind of assessment part of the national decision-making model, technology we can use to call out the key people involved. We can use it to understand their backgrounds, the threats that they pose, and to help to develop strategies and plans for dealing with them. We can use it again, as referenced before, to develop information, to go and find information in relation to the background complexity that everybody within policing is operating with. So there are a huge amount of powers. Legislation is growing on a regular basis. Officers and staff are trying to have to make sense of that in the context of a particular problem that they're dealing with. So technology is key to bringing that information to bear, at the right information at the right time. We then need to look at, well, what are the options? And again, there are a myriad of different options, and trying to help officers and staff by using technology to spoon feed the options more in the sense of menus and choices, and to guide and provide guardrails, is where technology can really assist with that triage process, where what we're trying to do is to map the circumstances, the threats, the context to the choices for action in terms of dealing. So technology here again can support that assessment, and then it can enable communication and collaboration. So you make a decision, the decision gets circulated, promulgated, it's acted upon. But what's key is then understanding the effectiveness, and so monitoring and also working together to identify how we could work better in the future. So I think, Jeff, next slide, please. Thanks. So in terms of the main UK policing challenges, we've got to think about data more strategically and more industrially. So this slide sets out on the left the kind of, I think, what might be generally accepted. You could label these challenges differently, but the sort of challenges that policing is dealing with is, I think, are characterized here in terms of dealing with increasing demand, more online crime, more crime that was previously hidden, victims needing to be more supported end to end through the whole investigatory and justice process, challenges policing within policing, and making sure that the standards are delivered, vetting is reliable, improving the way that police service engages with the public, because that's how the public form their impression of policing, along with greater bobbies on the beat police visibility. So and detecting more crime and working better with partners. So I think we've all, what we need to look at is, and this is what I've certainly seen before extensively, particularly during the last 10 years of my service, is the need to look away from tactical initiatives which generate, in effect, organizational technology spaghetti. They create a technology debt for the organizations, and to think more strategically in terms of the major platforms and capabilities that are now emerging, that are proven, maybe not necessarily always in policing, but a lot of these are analogies. So if we look at, I'll just take one because we're limited for time during this session, but contact management platforms, most forces operate with just a command and control system. Now, contact management platforms are very different beasts. They're in use within the commercial sector quite significantly. All major commercial service centers operate contact management platforms. They help to deliver rapidly and quickly self-service capabilities online, so the public can interact with businesses online as obviously a preferred means in terms of managing demand. They enable an organization to really understand the background of everybody that each of their clients that they're in contact with, by interacting with all these separate databases and bringing all the data to bear and making relevant information available to the agents dealing with the calls. So, for example, understanding what their preferred first language might be. And thereafter, they help to coordinate the response to that particular contact, again, by integrating with a series of other platforms and helping to monitor performance and providing the organization with insight. So there are a range of platforms that are emerging that each are sizable, they're enterprise, they're there to be used as the main building blocks for responding to particular needs of organization. But key at the top there is that the use has to be targeted towards the organization's objectives in terms of the organization strategy. There are very much finite resources. And then the next box specifically targeted towards user needs. And this is where the industrial approach needs to be, shark-eyed and clinical, in that the approach needs to be repeatedly driving delivery of value for the users, for the officers and the staff, and their feedback as to where the value is needed and whether what's been produced is valuable enough needs to be brought out almost aggressively in really understanding whether that delivery model is delivering or whether it itself needs to be optimized further. So I think, as I said at the start, I'm just looking to do a little bit of a scene setter for Neil and Piers. Where Neil's going to touch on now, Jason, is very much around one of these information management platforms and how it, for example, can help bring information together. And then I'm sure Piers will be able to expand on where AI can help, in particular, thinking about the policing need.
Okay, thank you, David. And again, you've obviously highlighted there all the policing challenges, and again, that list can go on for even longer than the list you've given us, can't you? Importantly, it's about how we make this happen, isn't it? Because the Policing Insight report highlighted that for some was not taking it seriously enough. The risks of not doing this right, and again, whilst it's not the same issue, but the news today around the MOD, breach of data, and the risk that presents to that organisation, to wider individuals working in that organisation around reputation is significant as well. So as colleagues that's on the call start thinking about questions, do you agree, disagree with what David said so far around the challenges? Is there anything else you think in terms of enablers that we should be looking at? But importantly, as people start considering those questions, David, what do you think we need to do differently then now? You've touched on some things about being strategic, but what's stopping us being strategic?
So I think it's so if we look at police spend on technology, it's around about 11% of the figures that I've got of overall budget, which is not unreasonable. I mean, I think that's so. But fundamentally, there's need to get more bang from the buck. Now, one of the main challenges at the moment is the extent of the investment just running legacy estates. So kit that is still expensive, inflexible, and is not integrated. So it's in part about, first of all, removing those items of the estate that are that dated that they need to be replaced. It's then about looking at these blocks, these main building blocks, being the platforms and the capabilities, and organizations testing their own maturity in terms of whether at one end of the scale, what's there looks more like a Heath Robinson diagram, or at the other end of the scale is something that is much more modern, contemporary, and all of the capabilities are there. But what brings it together, what brings all this together, and this is where I'm really genuinely, this is where we need to focus, is getting the strategy right, because there's very much a finite resource, and the strategy in terms of where the capability needed needs to be clear, how the technology is going to be wielded. So from digital colleagues, the delivery side of the strategy, how efficiency and effectiveness of that delivery is going to be improved, and what specifically we're going to deliver on. And then at the coalface level, in terms of each of those projects and work packages, agile is the absolutely only way to go. And what that's doing is making sure that the delivery is driven and the design of the solutions are driven out by users, because the risk if that doesn't take place is that delivery is academic and in a bubble, as opposed to being absolutely driven by the operational need.
Yeah, and I suppose the other question for us as well, David, you touched on there about that strategic buy-in, didn't you, which is around setting strategy. So buy-in from chief constables, police and crime commissioners, the wider criminal justice system leaders as well. How much do you think culture is a real blocker in this space?
Hugely, yeah, hugely. So biggest challenge that I faced on taking over responsibility for what was a failing information management program. It's called I6, the police Scotland were deploying. We're about to part company with the supplier, and I was asked to go in and not fail again. And what was key was this: we're in this waterfall mentality, So the waterfall mentality was very much about you kind of describe what it is you want, and then you write it all down, and then hope to lob it over the fence to a supplier that takes the contract, and it's their responsibility to deliver. The culture was not for working together, for collaboration with partners, for understanding that you've got to get the framework right in terms of getting the right platforms and the right capabilities. But then you have to work through it. It's complex. It's wicked. It's in the term wicked, meaning complex. It's significantly novel. Many aspects need to be worked through. Lots of unknowns. So that requires people to work together to problem solve within that framework. And the culture of not accepting, fail fast, learn quick is agile. It's understanding that actually this is hard. If you get the basics right and you get the building blocks in place, the rest is about how people work together and how you drive performance within that ecosystem. Oh, you're on mute, Jason.
That is a schoolboy error, isn't it? So we have got a question in from Slan. How does Capita leverage industry to provide wider value into policing?
So Capita So Capita's gone through a kind of phase. It went through a phase of buying other companies and having a lot of internal capabilities, and then went through a phase of shedding some of those companies and recognizing that actually that model was problematic in having, internal supply chains simply meant that the customer was always offered your own internal solutions as opposed to necessarily what more leading edge or best of breed. So Capita is now heavily about partnering with other companies, particularly where they offer really more leading edge capability. So as an example, recent project into policing, we were working heavily with a couple of companies, a company called Altia, who were providing a case management system, IBM providing some analytics and AI capabilities. And frankly, the reason we were doing that was because that was the best mix for the client. We could do some of that work, but not to the same extent as our partners could. So heavily investing. So the answer is we're heavily investing in partnering. We're looking to create a partner network that we can leverage whenever necessary. It's hard work though. So partnering is having really good relationships, understanding what the partners can offer does take time, but that's exactly where the Capita strategy is at the moment, and that's what we hope to do better and better as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you, David. And so colleagues, we've touched through there around the challenges. We've touched through some of the enablers to actually address the challenge, and we obviously took through some of the blockers at the moment. So I think it's right timing now. If we go across to Neil, Neil's going to talk us through about some of the technology that is available now to actually help police forces and get the best from the information that we've got. So over to you, Neil.
Thanks, Jason. Hi everyone, I'm Neil Skellum from our Capita Intelligent Communications business. What I wanted to cover off today is a little piece around how we've put an information management platform together to better help manage information and extract content from information. And I've got a couple of examples that I'll go through of how we do that as well. So I think from Capita Intelligent Communications, the business was born out of communication, sending communication in and out of an organization. But to do that, you need the information to create the communication in the first place. And we found as information is held more and more in disparate systems, in different formats, it became more and more difficult to collate that information initially to generate the communications that we were sending. So what we've been doing is developing a platform with a number of technology providers and partners that enables us to look at information from different systems, different formats, but to be able to structure that, understand what that content is, and then to be able to output it in various structured ways that we want to do so. So what I've got on screen here is a high-level overview of the platform and how it works. And on the left-hand side, we've got the input channels into the platform. So whether this is that you've got things like emails or the attachments that are held to emails, whether this is content on shared drives, that can be anything, whether it's PDFs, whether it's an audio file, whether it's a Word document, it might be images from legacy documents, whatever, content on shared drives, business systems, or information held in any digital format. It's a case of being able to pull these things from where they are into a single location so that we can manage those. And that also goes for some of the physical input that still floats around. So there's a lot of paper, legacy paper that might be in archive boxes, stored in warehouses. There might be paper in filing cabinets and so on, and still film and fiche and various older formats of information are still out there. So the initial point that we've got is to be able to input that content into a single platform, and we can do the physical digitization stuff. We've got various tools to enable us to import content from different locations, and we can then monitor those locations for new content that's being put into them, to be able to workflow those into the information management platform. So once we've got that content, that unstructured content that's lying around in different places, What we then try to do with the use of various bits of technology and some AI at this stage as well is to try and understand what that content is, and that's where the really important bit happens. So initially we'll look at with the help of AI, we'll look at the content that we've got, and we'll try to make sense of it. So we'll try to identify what the documents relate to, classify them into certain categories, and then we can start picking out bits of make some sense of that. So if we know it's a particular type of document, we might then want to start searching for personal information from it. We might want to start searching for financial information or whatever. We can start to apply those business rules to extract the information from those documents. That can be full data extraction, which I'll come on to and explain a little bit about at the moment, or we can just provide high-level indexing of those documents. But from that, once we've digitized that content, there's then various tools that we can use to add things into workflow processes. We can provide RPA processes, more automation within there, to be able to try and analyze and make sense and make use of the content that we've digitized. So from the output of that, essentially, once we've, and I'll show some examples at the moment of some of the types of data we extract and how we do it. But once we've done that, we can then output the content, what's then rich data, essentially, rich digital content that's got meaningful data associated with it. We can output those into whichever systems an organization might need to make use of it from one location. So at that point, you've got structured content, known content that's there in a central location. And to do all of that, there's various bits of technology that sit within this platform, as I say, with a bit of AI as well, but enables collation of all of this data from multiple systems into a single usable space. So Jeff, if we can jump onto, I'll go through, I think I've got 4 or 5 examples of information that we can capture. So Jeff, if you can just jump onto the next page. So what I've got here is a starting simple, if you like, is from a sort of known type document. Now this particular image that we've got was from a camera phone. Somebody's completed a document, taken a photo of it to send it in, one type, but this could be anything, this particular document. But what we're showing on the right hand side here is using a couple of different AI engines. Essentially, we're looking at being able to identify and capture information off the page. Now, you will have seen this in the past with the use of OCR and ICR to do this sort of thing, which was had some levels of success, but nothing in comparison to what we can do today with AI data extraction. So what you can see on the right-hand side there are, these aren't sort of zonal. We haven't sort of set this up. We've just applied this image into the tool and asked it to collect certain pieces of information. The system is then able to look through and identify that it's looking for a name, or it's looking for a particular piece of information. It can identify what those bits of information are, and then give you a confidence level of how good it thinks it is. And if you look at the couple of engines that we've looked at there, the one on the left, which is from Microsoft, generally very high. There's a couple of fields there that it wasn't particularly sure about. The AWS engines were a lot more confident. But what we do is we use multiple engines across this. We combine the results of those technologies to give us exceptionally accurate results from the content. And this is all lights out. This is without anybody having to be involved. So from that point, we've converted an unstructured image essentially into some rich data. So Jeff, if you can jump on another one, please. So, and this was really just to show some of the power of it. So, from a completely, this was a written letter, but something that is completely unstructured. There's literally no typed text or anything in there. This is a pure handwritten letter. and with no input from any human whatsoever, or any rules or knowledge that we've had to put into the system. Just simply putting this content, this could be notes from a notebook, this could be a letter, this could be whatever, but to convert that into digital data by applying that image into the software, the black box on the left hand side is giving you the results of what the system has come up with. And if you look through that, you'll probably struggle. You may find a character in there somewhere, but from something that is completely unstructured, the accuracy levels that we get with no manual intervention are extraordinary these days. We use this a lot for things like medical records as well, which are completely unstructured, very difficult handwriting sometimes to read as well. But the systems are very, very good at doing this these days. So next slide, please, Jeff. So with that, the tool can also do an audio transcription. So if you think about call center recording or mobile phone recordings that are being used, the system can extract that voice data, convert it into digital data, and again, pull out key bits of information depending on what it might be related to. So pulling out names, dates, locations, these sort of things that we can do, again, all with the use of AI. And again, please, Jeff. And then, so other than just being able to extract content and put it into structured format, the tool also enables us to automatically do redaction. So in the event that there is information that needs to be passed around, we can use AI and automation to be able to accurately redact information from whatever content it was to start with. So this example here is looking to redact personal information. This is with no manual input. The system has been able to go through this completely unstructured document and identify what is personal data within there, what was financial data within there, and has automatically extracted it. Now, if you note the little blue box down at the bottom, so when I sort of analysed this, I picked up on that account name, the H and the B, it hadn't picked up as personal data, and I can understand why. But the tool does allow manual redaction of that as well, where you would just select over the area that you wanted to redact and be able to redact it as well. That would obviously come out black once it's once it's processed. So the auto redaction tools are really quite powerful as well. And then last example, Jeff, if you jump to the next one, please, is around sentiment analysis. And again, this can be done from anything. This can be done from a phone call. This can be done from documents or whatever it may be. This particular example I quite liked. In that this was a letter that somebody had written to a council actually about the noise that the binmen had been making, and the technology is looking at the content, how it's been written, the words that are in there, and deciding on the sentiment of the letter, which then helps for what you do with it afterwards, where you may send it. The wording in here, that there is some quite positive wording in here. There are things such as polite, friendly. There is words like gentle, good humor, laughing, which are all positive type words. But the system has actually looked at the context as a whole and been able to understand, despite the fact there's a lot of positive words in there, this is not a letter that is a positive letter. This is saying that there's it's a complaint and it's a problem. And what the system has done is identified that this is a 72% negative sentiment on this letter and an 8% positive. And hence it can be routed and pushed into the right location. So it just shows the power of AI, not just looking at individual words. It's a bit cleverer than that in being able to look at the whole context. And as I say, that can be used on, this was a handwritten letter, but could be used on any piece of content or audio and so on and so forth. So I think that was what I wanted to cover from the tools that we're putting together, using a bit of AI in there, a bit of technology from different partners, but you can see the value of being able to take content from multiple places, be able to structure it, pull out key pieces of information, and then use other tools to move it down the line through workflow for better use going forwards.
Okay, thanks, Neil. That's really helpful. Some examples, and just keeping on the theme of examples, there's a question from Adrian from the Metropolitan Police regarding, can you give us any user case examples around using the information management platform to achieve greater efficiencies around responding to data rights issues, either inside or outside policing? A good example that would be like freedom of information, which I know is significantly demanding on policing at the minute. So can you give any examples there?
Yeah, so we're not doing anything with this with policing at the moment, but it's an area that, as I say, we came from communications management, so using information to generate communications. We've realized the power of the tool that we've got, and policing is an area that we think can benefit from this massively, on the basis that there is so much content in so many different formats, and then being able to try, and the next step to this is to then look at being able to analyze all of that content, identify known people, known places, that sort of information from disparate data becomes exceptionally powerful. So where we use this at the moment, we've been doing a lot of it within healthcare. We're using it for local authorities. We're using it for financial services at the moment. So this is being used broadly, but currently we're not using it in policing. But it's something that the more we've developed this over the past 18 months, 2 years, the more we've realized different markets will benefit from this, and definitely something that we feel will be good for policing.
Yeah, thank you. And just a couple more questions before we hand over to Piers. So looking at what you've created, a data pipeline to stimulate data architecture, what sort of stack layering approach have you taken?
So everything's cloud-based that we produce. Number of different technology partners in there, and linked into that, we provide a managed service with this as well. So this isn't a software as a service platform that we would sell. This is something that we would manage completely as a managed service through the cloud. Okay,
thank you. And the last one for now, can the sentiment analysis understand sarcasm too? Well, that's quite appropriate, isn't it?
I don't know is the answer. I think it's certainly with audio, maybe something we can do some testing on, and understand whether it can pick that up or not. So I don't know, potentially would be the answer. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Neil. Thank you for the insight on that. So Piers, we're going to hand over to yourself now around about artificial intelligence, again, how that can help to make sure we're improving productivity and efficiency for policing as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jason. Afternoon, everybody. So AI is absolutely the hottest ticket in town at the minute, particularly generative AI. But I thought that would be useful that before we get to where you've seen some examples with Neil of AI already helping and where we think it will be able to help in the future, it would be useful to make sure that we're all on the same page, because you would be very easily forgiven, I think, for being a little confused as to all the words that are being bandied around at the moment. So really quickly, let's take a race through the obligatory kind of Venn diagram that you've got to have at the moment when you talk about AI. So firstly, I think about AI as that kind of broad set of tools, right? That's primary focus is to mimic the behavior of what we do as humans. So how can we get tools that allow you to do that? So think of everything from your smartphone at the minute through to voice control in the car, through to home assistants, or more recently, perhaps tools you've been using like ChatGPT. So AI is that broad set of tooling. Within that, machine learning is probably the biggest subset of AI currently. And that's what you've been using. If you've been using AI over the last number of years, it's pretty much certain it was a machine learning approach. And for me, that's thinking about teaching children, right? Thinking about teaching a child, and they learn by doing and through experience. So instead of the rule-based systems of the 80s and 90s, where you were programming explicitly every element of what the system was going to do, machine learning was the tooling that allowed you to learn from that data. So it identified the patterns, saw the decisions, and it was able to make decisions based on past observations. So very much see something, understand whether it's the same. And that's the capability is really powerful when you get to things, for example, like medical diagnosis, where it predicts patterns based on images, past patterns based on medical data from the tests that you're doing. And what we've been doing in the AI field over the last number of years is moving us towards deep learning, which is another element of machine learning, essentially. And that was trying to look at the neurons and the connections and pathways in the brain, and trying to look at how we process things as a human. So it uses layers of algorithms rather than a single algorithm, and that's where the idea of deep comes from. It's got a number of layers that moves data and uses different activation functions in the math that underlines it. So the idea is that deep learning allows us to really deal with the huge amount of data that we've got, and also to do things like recognizing objects in photos. So that the famous, is it a cat, is it a dog, or as Neil was just talking to you about as well, do we understand spoken words and what do they mean? So the power of deep learning is really focused on the huge amounts of data that's being used to train it, and also the huge amount of data that's being pushed towards it today. So take, for example, image recognition. Deep learning's trained not only, as I said, to be able to spot the fact that it's a cat or a dog, but it can also look at much finer details, such as the kind of breed that it may be, or the emotions on a person's face. And to the attendee that asked about sarcasm, yes, indeed, sentiment analysis can now start to spot sarcasm coming through there as well. So one of the key advantages, as I say, for deep learning is its flexibility and scalability, right? It can consume a huge amount more data than we were used to putting towards it. And as a result, the most effective deep learning models are being trained on the vast subsets of data that are available. And that's where we're starting to see the advantages over the last 18 months, 2 years of large language models. But that requires huge amounts of computing power as well. So big data, cloud computing, and AI all coming together at the right time, essentially. The last couple of little bits in that diagram in front of you are natural language processing, so NLP. That's, as Neil already alluded to, where the ability to understand and interact in human language comes from. So every time you ask Siri a question, or to set an alarm, or Google to translate something, that's NLP at work. And it's about converting our language and being able to understand the rules of that language, and in many cases the slang terms that we're working with, so that we can have a natural conversation with devices to support us. That's then a subset of that, again, is obviously conversational AI, and that's looking to mimic as much as we can that kind of interaction and conversation. And lastly, as I said, the large language models that we've been working with that have really transformed AI and its applications. I think everybody would agree here over the last sort of 18 months or so. So in summary, when we talk about AI, we're not talking about one thing. We're talking about a whole bunch of different models and technologies that come together, and it's a real constellation, I think, of tooling that allows us to recognize patterns, process language, and have conversations. But the key thing is that we're seeing AI progress massively and evolve hugely quickly over the recent number of months, because of the fact of the base models that we now have in LLM. So, Jeff, if you could move on just one slide for me, that would be great. Because what we want to do is we want to understand how we enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of policing, right? And that could be, to me, summed up as a lot of our customers talk to us about today, of being able to do more with less, right? That's the challenge that they currently face. How do we manage this huge amount of data that we have available to us today? How do we find the key information that we want to do, that we want to get out of that? And how do we ensure that we're providing the best service, or a very important role of policing, the best law enforcement and supporting services to the citizens wherever we happen to be? So the good news is that AI can be applied pretty much anywhere, right? And we're going to see that as we touch on some of the potential use cases. The bad news, I think, is that AI is not a silver bullet, right? I think if you came here hoping to hear that there was one model that was going to solve all of your problems, you're going to be disappointed. I think, David already touched on agile and digital transformation, and I think the key piece for me is knowing that AI is part of the solution, wrapped up with automation, wrapped up with more digital solutions, and wrapped up with data management. But it is a key piece of those solutions. So if we start to think a little bit perhaps about where AI might be able to help, we can obviously go straight to the very sexy ideas, right? The very sexy ideas of predictive policing and CCTV images being able to be produced and managed, and accessing that data and identifying the facial recognition, and they're there today. You know, I was working in predictive policing probably 10 years ago, and the challenges that were there 10 years ago still exist in terms of the bias and the models and so forth. But I think what we're starting to see is a movement towards more acceptance, perhaps, and the reduction of resistance that Jason, you touched on a little bit earlier in terms of the cultural changes helping with that. But what I don't want to do today is necessarily focus on those kind of big predictive policing and types of areas. And I want to think about where it actually supports the frontline policing and allows people to focus on doing the job that they signed up to do, rather than necessarily a lot of the admin and supports roles that sit behind that. So if we work our way really briefly around the circle, you know, and we start to think about optimization, we start to think about where and how we can move the resources that are limited to us around and through the area and the patch that we're responsible for policing. We start to think about how we can interpret the data that we've been gathering for years and years and start to understand the underlying patterns that we couldn't necessarily sit down right now on our own and start to understand. And you know, David and I've had this conversation just recently in terms of, you could certainly look at where you would position your staff and your response cars and so forth at the outset of a shift. But as the dynamic nature of that shift starts to unfold, you couldn't possibly start to deal with the permutations and the support mechanisms to be able to recalculate that on the fly and think about how you want to necessarily move resources around. And that's a really bread and butter issue for AI potentially coming through there. If we think about citizen engagement is hugely important, not just in the public sector, but in the private sector as well. And I think we can absolutely look at policing learning. I think it was David again earlier said that, you know, we need to borrow a lot from what we're seeing in the private sector. We need to support citizens in being able to be self-serving, right? How are they able to leverage tools like chatbots? And everybody gets a little bit worried when we mention chatbots, but the latest version of chatbots and virtual assistants are actually very, very powerful at being able to provide the right answer at the right time to citizens. So how do we make that the first port of call for people that don't need to speak to an officer perhaps straight away, but are looking to try and get some information, so that, again, we can make sure that we're focusing the right people on the right roles. How do we then use AI to support perhaps some of the risk and compliance issues? So how do we make sure that we're detecting unusual activity perhaps on behalf of police officers? You know, there's been a lot of unfortunate coverage in the press over the last number of months and years about officers who could have perhaps been detected more quickly than they were. And I think there's a piece there to be able to say, well, how do we make sure that we're using the technology, the data that we have available to us, and joining up that data to be able to identify those individuals that shouldn't be in the police force, or perhaps are doing something that they shouldn't be as they go through. But we can also then start to think a little bit more about intelligent automation and how automation of processes reduce the burden on frontline officers. So if we think about having to put reports together, much of that data is available through different mechanisms already. So do they need to be able to sit down and pull that information together, or could we automate the writing of some of those reports and then just allow them to quickly review it, make sure they're happy with it, and say yes, it's an absolutely fair reflection of what's happened. Key thing there, I think, is to make sure that we're not talking about taking the human, the police officer, out of the loop and automating this from end to end, but rather we're talking about how do we support them by being more efficient, and again, allowing them to get back into those kind of frontline duties as quickly as possible. One thing I would call out, just as we finish off this slide, perhaps, is the fact that all of this is based on data management and data sharing, right? So we need to make sure that we're addressing the silos of data that forces have built up and that organizations have built up, and looking at how we manage the quality of that data, because the quality of that data obviously drives the quality of the AI that falls out the other side. Jeff, if you could just move on to the last slide from me, please. Because that takes us, I think, to the challenges and the limitations that we've got, and some of the things that we need to be cognizant of as we try to deploy AI. Because, maybe not a great example for somebody from Belfast, but an iceberg necessarily doesn't fit that well. But if we think about the bit that we see above the water here is where AI has an impact. But what we don't necessarily think about is the technology that we just touched on, in terms of, is the data quality and maturity enough? Have we got the the data architectures and the data pipelines that one of the audience questioned Neil about as well? Are they in place? Do we have the right mindset to get going quickly? Because rightfully so, and this isn't limited to policing by any stretch, but there is a reticence about AI and about some of the challenges that are going to come out of that, and about the transparency and the explainability and the acceptability of what the AI models produce. So how do we start to prove the impact of that? And again, David mentioned agile, and that kind of discovery mindset and experimentation is really important. And the people that are going to deliver that. So, that digital change is hard in most organizations. AI-enabled digital change is possibly slightly harder again. So do we have the people within the organizations who are going to be not only that senior stakeholder, Jason, that you talked about earlier, but the agents for change on the ground, the people that are going to evangelize for you and show what's possible and have some of the hard conversations. And finally, for me, one of the biggest areas is around governance. Do we have in place the right governance, guardrails, policies and standards around the ethics and around how we do AI to make sure that we're doing responsible AI? So it's not an easy set of questions to answer, but it's the questions that we do need to answer, I think, in order to unlock the benefits that AI can very clearly bring to us.
Okay, Piers, thank you very much. And just linked into that last slide, we've got a question in terms of training. What sort of training do you think is going to be required for new and experienced officers to understand the technology?
Yeah, it's a great question, I think. And from my experience, the first thing is trying to make sure that, we're engaging with the officers at the very outset of that to understand how they want to use the technology and how it becomes an aid rather than a distraction. And I think designing that solution and designing the solutions with them ensures that you've got the right kind of tooling at the end. But certainly the training piece for me is thinking and being aware about how much you trust the AI, growing that experience and that trustworthiness with it, understanding how you integrate with it and how it fits into the other systems that you've got, and also then thinking about how you want to access it. So again, from previous experience, do you want to talk to your AI assistant and give it the experience and instructions that way? Do you want to, have a multimodal way of dealing with it and be able to text into it or whatever? And I think the last piece of the puzzle for me is making sure that you've actually got that awareness about, what you put into the AI and how secure it is and how that impacts what you get back. So I think there's a general awareness piece, Jason, and then I think there's a technology-driven training piece to it as well.
And do you think, Piers, that obviously you touched on there about the importance of understanding of the system and the way of working and what we're going to put into it and not put into it? Do you think the complexity in the language actually is putting people off to get more engaged in this important topic?
I think a little bit, Jason. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's the marketing around it from a lot of the big players is great because it feels like that silver bullet and it should be very easy. And then the more you delve into it, the harder it starts to look and become. And I think, naturally, the public sector is risk adverse, and naturally there will always be a reticence there. So I think there's very much an education piece, a plain talking piece, and a phased approach to start to understand how you can get to that. But yeah, absolutely, I think there's certainly people looking at it thinking this would be great, and then suddenly thinking, well, this looks pretty hard, and I don't know where to start.
Yeah, and obviously you touched on there throughout your session, Piers, about the benefits, the opportunities that it creates. But clearly, as you touched on there is some real concerns and challenges as well. Just for those that's listening in today, what do you see as the top two challenges for policing in this area?
I think the responsible AI, so the bias piece of it, depending on how you're going to use the AI technology. So whether that's transparency, responsibility, ethics, whatever name you want to put on it, I think you need to be able to understand how the models are created and how you use them. And I think probably the second biggest challenge, and it's not unique to policing, but it's data, right? It's the quality and access to data in that place, in that kind of space as well. So how do you make sure that you're making as much good quality data available? How do you make sure you're addressing any bias which is already built into that? So the two are very linked, but very much for me, data quality and ethics as well, Jason.
Yeah. And in itself, to be fair, Piers, ethics and data quality could be a webinar in itself, couldn't it, to talk through some of the issues around that. So,
yeah.
Okay, we've got one question in, then we'll just go to a general Q&A, and I'm obviously going to come back to the presenters to talk through their one or two key headlines and messages from today's event as well. But I think it's for you, this one, if I'm very honest, in terms of the platform. Obviously, one of the questions we've asked is, taking account it's not yet in policing, how does it suggest that it's not been considered regarding the wider disclosure, management information, and obviously the criminal investigation requirements? So I don't know if you want to come in.
That's probably to me. Is that probably to me? Is it?
Yeah, you've got it.
Yeah. So I think just on that point, it's so we're not changing the information that's being held. The information is being held already. So the rules around what you can hold and what you can't hold, we're not changing any of that at all. All we're doing is making that accessible. So I take the point. There may be specific things that we may need to tweak and tailor around, specifically around policing, given that we're not deploying this within policing at the moment. But we're not changing anything about the content that's being held. There is a whole piece around records management, information management, GDPR, data protection, all of these things that is almost a separate conversation. But our tool isn't changing any of that. It's just making that content more accessible.
Jason, so I responded just to Richard on that particular question. It's an area that, being the lead for the information management system, the police Scotland now is very, very familiar with, the whole legal framework in that respect. It is I think one of the, as Neil points out, it's a concern that police forces will be operating at the moment with a lot of data in fully compliant systems, the record management systems, so compliant in terms of auditing the data, logging the data, being able to weed the data in accordance with sensible rules, but being able to speak to who has consulted the data, as they say, which would effectively access the data, processing, etc. So this system does all of that. One of the big challenge within policing is data that is off book. It is just sitting there miscellaneous in emails, in SharePoint drives, in paper-based records still that isn't compliant. And what this system does is enable that information to be brought together to be compliant, but also importantly to be then very easily accessible. So all of a sudden, all of that information and intel that's there becomes readily available. So yeah, it's something that the system is designed to do, and the nuance for any particular policing client we just need to work through.
And again, for colleagues that's with us today, David, obviously there's an opportunity following this webinar to have a conversation with yourselves, isn't it, about how it can actually work for individual forces or other areas of business as well. So, okay, thank you. So, colleagues, we've got a last couple of minutes before I just go back to the main presenters just for their last one or two key messages. Is there any other questions? If you have any more questions, please fire it into the box now. We can pick it up. But I'm going to come back to yourself, David. In terms of what we've talked about today, if you could give one or two key messages to those that's joined us, what would they be?
Yeah, so it's thinking, think strategically. The Policing Insight review paper highlighted a range of frustrations in relation to digital and policing. My experience is that you've got to think in you've got to get the framework right, and you've got to then make sure that the capabilities, these building blocks, are mature, are proven. It doesn't necessarily matter if they're not proven in policing, as we've discussed. It is all about those large capabilities and the partners that can help wield them, and then getting the methodology right, which is very user-centered, which then says, okay, within that framework, delivering on our priorities and objectives, how do we get the teams of people working together to make sure that we have a pipeline of, so it's a production line of capabilities coming out. And if they aren't coming out rapidly enough, providing enough value at low enough cost, then improve it. So yeah, so I think it's really about how we organize, any organization organizes itself to drive out delivery using digital. Jason?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to come to you in a short while, Neil, just for your key message, but there's just a question popped into the box, probably for yourself, Piers, about how easy it is to change suppliers once you invest in an AI solution, and how do you ensure that data feed into that one solution is removed if you move to another one? You're able to answer that question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's the fear of vendor lock-in essentially, and I think that's where the education piece at the outset is important. I think maintaining and holding your own data, especially in the public sector, is huge. So I think looking at how you separate your data management and data storage from any downstream solutions is the first step in that. So making sure that you've got separation of architecture there between data management and any AI solution, and then trying to understand and work with as many of the kind of open source, and by that I don't mean the traditional open source tooling, but I mean the kind of the non-specialized, built for you kind of technology that would typically be delivered in services. How can you use as many of the off-the-shelf services from the hyperscalers, for example, and whether that's AWS or Microsoft or whoever, so that you're not getting that reliance on a third party, essentially would be my starting point, I think, Jason.
Yeah, okay, Piers, thank you. Matt, we've seen your question. We're conscious of time, so we will come back to you on that around the cyber security, how you enhance that. We'll come back to that offline for that question. To yourself, Neil, any key message?
Yeah, I guess just very, very, very quickly then. So I think with some of the stuff that I've described there, the fundamentals, the building blocks of that probably haven't changed in 20 years with OCR and ICR and that sort of stuff. I think what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years is this step change with RPA processing, with AI. We're able to use all of that foundations that we had, but now get very, very rich data at a fraction of the cost compared to having to have people do a lot of this stuff in the past. And it's been a total step change in this area. And it's more, I wanted to raise awareness that there are now these tools there that are accurate, that are live, and that are relatively low cost to be able to collate information, extract information, and make it usable down the line. So.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Thank you. Really good points. And last but not least, Piers, any key message from yourself?
Just start, I think, essentially. I mean, it's the right time to get going. I think from an AI point of view, you can start very small and grow. So trying to understand where your barriers are rather than necessarily guessing at where they might sit, Jason, is where I would suggest get started, get that discovery in place, and figure out what you need to do.
Yeah. So, colleagues, I'm really grateful. I know that the time, as always, is against us. So, firstly, a massive thank you for everybody that's joined us. Thank you for your questions. As I said, those that we've not managed to answer during the hour's slot, we will get back to you if we've not already got back to you during the presentation. A massive thank you to Dave, Neil, and Piers for your input. Really important. One that I always want to remember is a big shout out to those behind the scenes: Hayley, Charlotte, Ian, and others that's helped make today happen. As I said, look, this is a really important issue. If you've not read the back office to business critical, then please do read it. It highlights some of the challenges, but importantly, there is some opportunities now to start addressing those challenges. There will be a record of today's meeting, as I've said, that will be coming out in the coming days. And again, we've obviously left some contact details for the presenters today as well. So if you've got any questions that you think about after today's event, please get in touch with the team. If anything for now, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.